What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, January 3rd, 2018, getting into the middle of the week, hump day. Middle of the week, starting a long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and getting into the new year, actually. And speaking of which, because I was in a bit of a rush yesterday, I really didn't get to talk as much about the new year as I wanted to in regard to Hawaii's fireworks. Now, when Claire and I first moved here, you could buy fireworks on 4th of July, New Year's, Chinese New Year's. And that was really kind of cool. And then all of a sudden, the state government said, well, we have to ban them because the fumes from the fireworks are posing potential harm to people with respiratory distresses. And I sympathize with people who have damaged lungs. But on the other hand, I don't feel that all of us should be forced to live our lives by everybody else's limits, but that's the liberal philosophy. Needless to say, the state managed to undermine their excuse because they came on out and said that you could buy firecrackers if you first bought a permit from the city, which actually cost more than the firecrackers. Then that went away. But there's been a booming black market for fireworks every single New Year's. Not a lot of enthusiasm for Independence Day, but every New Year's. And this one was raucous. And I don't really have a quantitative way to analyze it, but my impression was that this was the most fireworks I was seeing going off since the year 2000, and that was just an epic display. And so at this point, it's obvious the ban isn't working. The fireworks are coming on in. People are wanting to buy them. And I really think it's time for Hawaii to rethink the ban and allow the people to have what the people want. That's just my point of view on this. And a lot of people are looking forward into this next year, and they're starting to ask, what is it going to bring us? And the question that seems to be uppermost on almost everybody's mind, including mine, is, are we going to see the start of a major global war? And some of the articles we had linked to whatreallyhappened.com. One came from the Saker 2018, War or No War. And out there saying that Trump administration's new national security strategy shows that the U.S. government is in full paranoid mode. All those other countries, they're coming to get us. And things are not as bad as they would have been if Hillary had been elected. But they're bad enough to ask, are we on the cusp of a major global war? Paul Craig Roberts had an article out there saying how much death and destruction awaits us in 2018. And basically, he's concerned that Russia is being very cautious diplomatically, and that Washington, D.C. may misinterpret that as a sign of weakness and make a very, very bad mistake. But unfortunately, what we're seeing, Trump's national security strategy reminds me very much of the policy papers that were coming out of the Project for the New American Century in the 1990s. And they've reformed, they've got a new name, I forget what it is. But they're still putting out these neocon policy papers pushing for war. And according to this article that came out of UNS.com, it appears that the neocons have set their sights on Afghanistan. They've already announced there's going to be a massive surge there. A return into Syria. They're actually putting Russia on the list. And then Iran, the Donbass, North Korea, and Venezuela. And of course, there are other countries threatened by the U.S. to various degrees. But these are the 7 that seem to really be at the top of the neocons' wish list. Of course, they're not going to go fight those wars themselves. That's what your kids are for. Now, an interesting little article came out of Investment Watch blog. The Trump impeachment is still the Democratic agenda for 2018. And we're at a situation right now where, while Trump has been a disappointment on certain areas, such as the wars, it does look like he's doing a good job. And the new tax reform is really going to help bring jobs back. Small businesses benefiting. And by the way, Trump's new tax plan raised his own taxes. You don't hear that in the corporate media. But at this point, the Democrats have nothing to offer. They don't even have a real leader with any popular standing. That crybaby snowflake image has backfired on them. They don't have any policies. They didn't have any policies last year. It was just playing the victim card, playing the race card, playing the woman card. And their agenda is simply to oppose whatever the Republicans are putting forth. That's it, obstructionism. That's what the Democrats are going to be doing, and hoping that because they can paralyze Trump and the Republican Congress, that will lead to public outcry, which can in turn be transformed either into election victory later this year or grounds for impeachment, although, again, there have to be specific crimes committed for impeachment. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The New York Times has broken a story where apparently two close Clinton allies paid at least $700,000 to prominent sexual harassment lawyer Lisa Bloom to find women willing to accuse then-candidate Donald Trump of sexual misconduct the week before the presidential election. Remember where that all came on out, and everybody said, all these years later. But apparently, like mother, like daughter, and this is the way Lisa Bloom was coming up with accusers. They were just paying them. Another article over at Veterans News Now saying the same thing. The neocons are apparently back in power. And for a candidate who ran on that message of change and pulling back from military intervention, his national security strategy is essentially reinforcing the status quo policies. And that is a tremendous disappointment. Now, as you know, the situation around Huma Abedin is heating up. In fact, she's trending up on Twitter for exposing classified secrets. And what's really interesting, I was seeing it being covered on the corporate media earlier today, and they were out there trying to use the Comey defense, saying that it was just carelessness that Huma Abedin had all this classified information on her laptop. She didn't mean to do wrong, therefore it's a nothing burger. But again, if you go back and you look at Title 18, which governs the handling of classified government secrets, intent is not required. It specifically says in there, negligence, carelessness, recklessness. The crime is the exposure of the classified information, not what you meant to do. And apparently, another story that's come on out, Huma Abedin forwarded top secret passwords to a Yahoo account. And apparently this Yahoo account was accessed by somebody who was working for the same Moscow bank former President Bill Clinton gave a $500,000 speech to in 2010. So it's really beginning to unravel out there. Now, Donald Trump is demanding the Department of Justice act on this information, on the Abedin-Clinton classified email mishandling. And thank you, Judicial Watch, because they're the ones who pried that data out of that laptop, metaphorically speaking. So I imagine Huma Abedin is feeling very, very nervous right now. But again, all of this really goes back to Hillary Clinton. The private email server was her idea. She ignored warnings about the use of an unsecured BlackBerry. And the classified info is on Weiner's laptop, Huma's laptop, because of Hillary Clinton. Now, over at the Hill, John Solomon is reporting that Republicans on key congressional committees say they have uncovered new irregularities and contradictions inside the FBI's probe of Hillary Clinton's email server. And basically, investigators have found written evidence that the FBI did believe laws had been broken when Hillary Clinton and her aides transmitted sensitive material over that server. And that evidence includes passages in FBI documents stating the sheer volume of classified information that flowed through Clinton's insecure emails was proof of criminality as well as an admission of false statements. But again, Title 18 does not require intent. They don't have to prove that she meant to do wrong. And again, I think it's a legitimate question that needs to be asked. Did Hillary Clinton replay Bill Clinton's 1994 Chinagate scandal? Bill Clinton, as president, was running for re-election, used his authority as president to authorize the sale to China of highly sensitive military technology over the objections of the Defense Department and intelligence agencies. And in return, Chinese money was funneled into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign fund using Chinese-American citizens to make it all quasi-legal. But there was an investigation. It didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. But these Chinese citizens revealed the money had originated with Chinese financiers and in at least one case with Chinese intelligence. So, with that as past history, I still think it's a legitimate question. Was Hillary Clinton selling United States secrets using her weak email server to deliver the product and that so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money? WikiLeaks has now dumped a new set of emails, basically proving that the New York Times was colluding with Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State. And basically, WikiLeaks has revealed that a Times reporter used to feed State Department email updates of the stories the paper would be publishing days before the stories appeared. This is while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. And the heads-up email was intended to give State and Clinton time to come up with some spin for any stories that might have caused problems. Or the heads-up could give the State Department time to create a diversion on the same day, thus overriding a damaging story with other news its friends in the corporate media would happily cover instead. And we did see quite a bit of that. Big damaging stories come on out, and oh my goodness, look over here, it's a fire. Look at the fire. Now, apparently there was a lawsuit filed by two Democratic Party donors alleging that the Trump campaign and former advisor Roger Stone conspired with Russians to publish the leaked Democratic National Committee emails on WikiLeaks. Now, first of all, we know that Russia had nothing to do with it. It was a leak by Seth Rich. But this lawsuit, orchestrated by a group called Project Democracy, basically was trying to, again, sell this idea that there was collusion between Trump and WikiLeaks and Russia. But unfortunately, the lawsuit is not doing very well because of elements of the First Amendment. And there's a legal process called the Bartnicki First Amendment test. And the first part of the case law is the defendant may not be held liable for a disclosure of stolen information if it deals with a matter of public concern, like the Pentagon Papers. And apparently there's a movie coming on out now about the Pentagon Papers and how they got published. They're trying to rebuild the reputation of the Washington Post. And the basically, nobody committed a criminal act within the purview of the lawsuit. Trump did not commit a criminal act. Julian Assange did not commit a criminal act. And basically, along with defeating this lawsuit, they've laid out a solid case for freeing Julian Assange. He has not committed a crime. And they're talking about what's called a preemptive pardon, which is very rare but not unheard of. So Julian Assange may finally get a chance to walk free. Now, over in the establishment media, a gentleman named Norm Ornstein literally came on out in a speech in front of the Aspen Institute saying that he was worried Trump is going to order the murder of members of Congress. Now, we've all been making jokes about Trump derangement syndrome, but this guy seems to actually have a case of it, to come on out with an allegation like that. Now, as you all know, Al Franken stepped down from the Senate, and word is now Michelle Bachmann is going to come on in and run for the Minnesota Senate seat this year. So we'll see what happens with that. Over in Iran, things are getting very, very tense. The death toll is rising. And Ayatollah Khamenei is blaming enemies as signs of a deliberate destabilization campaign become much more obvious. Actually, it's been obvious to a lot of us all along. They tried this back in 2009. And the protests, which were originally about economic conditions and corruption, are obviously being co-opted by Western powers to try and bring the Iranian government down. Now, we know that not too long ago, Israel and the United States basically came to an agreement that they were going to go after Iran somehow to counter Iran's influence in the region. Meanwhile, Iran's mission to the United Nations has decried the U.S. comments over the protest rallies. And basically, Nikki Haley is up there screaming that Iran is bad. How could they do this? And basically called on the international community to back the riots. So Iran is very upset at those comments. Russia came out and said the U.S. really doesn't have a place to criticize Iran because of the way the U.S. government crushed Occupy Wall Street and Ferguson. Remember the article we talked about yesterday where observers were saying, a commentator at CNN was saying, the U.S. lacks moral standing. The world does not see the United States as having a moral basis for what it's doing. This is more of the same. Now, it turns out there is a British group, the Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group. It's a unit in one of Britain's intelligence agencies. And it's a social disruption unit. They create sock puppet accounts and fake content on social media in order to use dirty tricks to destroy, deny, degrade, and disrupt enemies by discrediting them. And apparently they have been targeted on Iran, trying to create social disruption. And word from Iran now is that apparently a European has been arrested for rallying up the protesters, trying to get them to go violent. Now, there are no details. We don't have a name, just this initial breaking report. Meanwhile, Iran is pointing their finger of blame at Saudi Arabia, saying that Saudi Arabia is in Iran, trying to kick up rioting and protests. So, what's going on in Iran? Again, the United States has never forgiven Iran for the revolution of 1979, which kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah of Iran, and resulted in Iran selling their oil and gas at fair market prices instead of the very generous discounts that had been given to American and British oil companies. And it hasn't been all sweetness and light because the incoming revolutionary government is highly religious, and prior to 1979, under the Shah, Iran was a secular country. But apparently they're trying to fan up that issue between religious versus secular to try and get people to call for the end of the Islamic Republic. Now, last time they did this, in 2009, they made two critical mistakes. They rolled out a new flag for the Republic of Iran, which turned out to be the exact same flag that had flown under the Shah's rule. And that got the Iranian people thinking very carefully about what was going on. Second, the son of the Shah went on out and started saying how he was ready to resume the throne of Iran when the Iranian people welcomed him, which, as it turned out, they did not. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials here. I'm going to go check on Claire. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And once again, the address, if you want to support Republic Broadcasting, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to call on in and become a subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, for those of you who remember the last attempt to regime change Iran in 2009, you'll remember how blatant and obvious some of the media manipulation became. And it's already started now. And apparently conservative media contributor Kambri Kawahina-Koa published a video to her Twitter feed that purported to show a mass anti-government demonstration in Iran and basically claimed 300,000 March for Democracy in Iran. However, Twitter users were quick to check the claim and debunk it, pointing out the video is actually of protests in Bahrain in 2011. Now, that is significant, not the fact that they debunked this video, but that the public has become very skeptical of anything being fed to them in the corporate media or social media. And they're going on out and checking. And that means there are literally millions of fact checkers keeping an eye on the corporate media. And that is a very, very good thing. You should never trust the corporate media or the government. Why? Because they are the corporate media and the government. So already the lies and propaganda are out there in support of this latest attempt to overthrow another country that's never actually done anything to us. Now, Donald Trump seems to have decided that withholding foreign aid is a good thing to do, which in terms of saving more money for the American people, it is a good thing. But the U.S. has withheld $255 million in aid to Pakistan over their ties to terrorism, and it sounds like a real noble reason. Then they slip up and reveal what's really going on, because they mention that the U.S. government will never forget how Pakistan betrayed them at the United Nations, because Pakistan voted in favor of the UN resolution on the status of Jerusalem. So there's a little bit of a gotcha there as well. So the United States has given Pakistan more than $33 billion with a B dollars over the last 15 years. Rand Paul is in agreement. It's time to cut off that money. And I would agree as well. I mean, all this foreign aid, it's really an attempt to bribe the governments, bribe the leaders of these other countries to go along with the U.S. agenda. Very little of that money actually gets down to ordinary people, and that's the hard reality. Well, now Trump is threatening to cut off all financial aid to Palestine. And what Donald Trump is saying, now that he has angered everybody and just riled them up by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, now he says, come back to the peace table. And the Palestinians are saying, no, we don't think so, not when you've basically given away our capital city to the other side. And so Trump is threatening to cut off all financial aid to the Palestinians, and the Palestinian reply is Jerusalem is not for sale. But it is very unreasonable for Donald Trump to do something that he had to know was going to inflame the Mideast, and then sit there and expect the Palestinians to come back and talk with the Israelis at the peace table, given that every previous talk with Israel at the peace table has produced nothing of substantive value. So I think he's being directed on this one. Donald Trump is also back on the warpath with Kim Jong-un, and apparently is literally getting on out there with a nuke-waving game going on. Donald Trump's new message for Kim Jong-un is, we have a bigger and more powerful nuclear button. And there was this photo of Donald Trump holding up two sheets of paper, and one has a little tiny red dot on it that says Kim's button, and the other one has a really big dot on it that says Trump's button. I hope Donald Trump understands how childish he looks doing this kind of thing, especially after the way Bibi Netanyahu was ridiculed for his cartoon bomb up at the United Nations. Would like to see the president start acting a little more presidential. But things may be changing over there, and rather rapidly, because North Korea has now reopened the hotline between the two Koreas. And they're having talks. And what they're talking about first and foremost is just calming everything down, and North Korea wants to come participate in the Olympics. So there's a little bit of an olive branch out there. I think Kim Jong-un is sending a message that he's not angry with South Korea, he's not angry with Japan, he's just trying to deter a U.S. invasion. Now, on the other hand, apparently Chinese tanks, soldiers, and military trucks are gathering on the Korean border and being told to prepare for a war. So we still don't know what's going to happen. We've got to take another break for commercials. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go to the phones here right now. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Justify this. The only person I know who quit the police academy out in Texas because the training they wanted to get was a 4-year veteran in the Harris County Sheriff's Department. He sat there and looked at this tape. He sat there and goes, there's no reason to draw a rifle. He just put his hands up against the wall, search him, and let him see the gun, and everything would have been done with. But, he said, but this officer was trained to escalate things, not try to, secure things. But, it's this thing is Donald Trump has a blind spot when it concerns the police in this country. And I really think, if they clean out the FBI, like they said, the swamp in the FBI and the Homeland Security, I hope they can reevaluate the training of the police officers that they're given.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. But unfortunately, the police officers are being trained to be a force for repression in our own country. This is deliberate. And it's a sign, of the encroaching dictatorship. It's also a sign of impending collapse. But Russia's absolutely correct to point out the U.S. has no right to criticize Iran after what the U.S. government did to occupy Wall Street and Ferguson.
And yeah, Russia's right. And the thing is, I'm going to start up a White House petition saying, President Trump, please reevaluate the training of our police officers.
Well, unfortunately, you can't do that anymore. They've shut down the White House petition page.
Personally.
Well, I think that's the reason why he's not the national security advisor, is the people who've been planning this war across the Middle East and across the globe. They've been working on this all the way back to the early 90s, and they're not going to let a little thing like an unexpected presidential victory get in their way.
But anyway, Mike, have a great new year. I'll let you get back to the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. Now, let's talk about the economy. Over at UBS, their strategist Matthew Mish came out with an observation that we have echoed as well. Millennials have never been more in debt. And it's a combination of rising cost of living, stagnant wages and salaries, school loans, which are a huge, huge mess, and millennials have been selling whatever assets they have to pay bills or cover the college loans. And there's this website. It's described as unconventional dating. It's called seekingarrangements.com, where basically young people go and partner up with some wealthy older person and trade the relationship for money to pay their bills. A couple of months ago, there was a girl who auctioned off her virginity online to raise money to pay her student loans. Well, now there's another one. This one, the needle on the Bex meter is kind of twitching on this one. There's this woman, Bailey Gibson. She's 23 years old, and she's offering to auction her virginity off at the Moonlight Bunny Ranch legal brothel in Carson City, Nevada. And her story is that she was engaged to be married. She wanted to be a virgin bride. She caught her boyfriend cheating on her, and they had a breakup, and something has just snapped. She doesn't want to get married anymore, and she's going to auction off her virginity to the highest bidder. And I got to tell you, this one, I'm having a hard time believing this one. This comes across as a bit of a scam. But I wish her luck. I'm sure that there'll be somebody who'll go on in for the fantasy value of buying a virgin. Just like all those people who were members over at Ashley Madison, and it turned out to be a gigantic hoax. Nobody was really hooking up for any affairs. It was just a fantasy thing. Paul Krugman is out there with a warning saying that the U.S. economy is far more fragile than it looks. Actually, it looks pretty fragile from where I'm sitting. but it does look like it's being held together with spit and baling wire. A lot of fraud, a lot of rigging for the stock market, a lot of outright lies on the unemployment. And meanwhile, Doug Casey is out there talking about a return to financial sanity, and he's looking at the change in Federal Reserve chairmanship, and he's saying that really the only way this economy can be saved would require some radical changes. And the problem is that nobody who is in the financial system wants to make the changes because the system benefits them. And so basically he admits the chances of the changes being made to save the economy on the whole is zero. The money junkies are in charge. And like any other addict, they can't see the damage their addiction is causing to those around them. That's really where we are right now. Apparently, subprime credit card and subprime auto loans are now in excess of the subprime housing crisis, meaning there is now a bigger bubble out there ready to pop. And it was a real tragedy that Wall Street didn't learn any lessons from the meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud in 2008. And the reason they didn't learn any lessons is they didn't have to pay for it. You did. With TARP and bailout and quantitative easing and all the rest of it to try and keep the system running for the benefit of the money junkies. And so they went right back to playing the same games again, and we're back at that same risk again. Now, a lot of people are getting very nervous about what's going on in Iran because if it does spill into civil war, that could send oil to $100 per barrel. That would be for the cost of all oil products, gas products, and anything that requires oil and gas to use, like trucking. And both the WTI and Brent opened above $60 per barrel for the first time in years. So it's already going on up. And the events in Iran are the reason for the bullish sentiment. Everyone thinks oil is going to be going up. The chaos will cause it to go up. And so they're getting in on it. Now, Barclays Bank has had a little bit of a technical goof. And apparently they were charging their customers double when they used their bank cards. And Barclays said that this was caused by a small technical glitch. It's been fixed, and no customer has been left out of pocket. But customers are saying they're worried of the duplication of deducted payments could happen again because the bank had a similar problem in October 2015 and 2016. I don't know who writes their software, but they're not really very good. Meanwhile, over in Egypt, their Grand Mufti has issued a fatwa against cryptocurrency, declaring that Bitcoin is banned by Islam. Now, possibly as a result of Donald Trump cutting off foreign aid to that country, Pakistan State Bank has now greenlit yuan-based trade with China. So again, everything the U.S. government does backfires. Pakistan is now going to pivot toward China, and they're dropping the use of the dollar. And the dollar is in decline right now. Australia's big four banks are expected to slash 20,000 full-time jobs through the year in an effort to cut costs and make way for new technology. And NAB got the ball rolling when it announced it would cut its job force by 6,000 to make way for 2,000 digital jobs. And they were followed by Commonwealth Bank, ANZ, and Westpac. Now, I know that businesses think automation is really good, but they're not thinking the big picture. Because carried through to its extreme, you're going to have an entire society where everything is being done by machines and there are no customers for the products and services being offered. because humans are not able to trade their skills and labor for decent wages and salaries to pump back in. They could automate our entire economy to the point where it simply locks up and stops functioning. Somebody somewhere needs to be setting some ground rules about keeping humans employed. Not that they've had that much care about it in this country. We've got, 99 million Americans have not been able to find a decent job in months, if not years. The economy is a mess. I'm still boggled by those numbers of homeless that we were reporting on last week. It's impossible to look at that and not realize the terrible shape this country is in. And their only solution is to try and declare war on everybody else. Okay, getting on over to Europe and immigration. Apparently, an 18-year-old Egyptian migrant has stabbed 3 college students in Ireland. This is their first incident dealing with a deadly Islamist attack. And apparently it was a series of attacks in Dundalk County, Louth, which left 1 man dead. Didn't seem to be any connection between the victims. They were simply being targeted at random. So how's that open border globalism thing working out for you? Meanwhile, over in London, as you know, Britain's mayor, Sadiq Khan, they made a big deal about it. He was London's first Muslim mayor, was elected in May of 2016. And basically, he ran on a we're not racist attitude. Keep the borders open, let them flood through the tunnel from Calais. And the result, in hindsight, was very predictable. Rises in knife crime, gun crime, which is amazing because guns are banned there, thefts, burglary, rape, homicide, and not just by a little bit. It is a significant upsweep. And it's happening all over Europe. And some of these countries are literally forbidding their media from identifying the ethnicity or immigration status of perpetrators of crimes. They'll simply say a suspect or the perpetrator. And they won't give out those details because they don't want the indigenous, if you will, Europeans saying, this has gone on too long. You're making us, you're putting us all at risk. Our lives are in danger. We're at risk of physical harm and crime because of this idiotic policy of open borders. So there was that article that actually came out about 2 weeks ago that said, oh, no, the illegal immigrants, they're actually far more law-abiding. They're really nice people. There's not going to be a problem. More propaganda, more lies. We can see the problems. It's happening all over. Now, over in Hungary, Viktor Orban is out there drawing the red line in the sand. He's quoted as saying, as we beat the Soviet Empire, we'll beat Soros' empire. So Orban knows who's really orchestrating all of this. And George Soros, I think, is in love with his own legend. Because like the money junkies, he's grasping after that ideal, his dream. And he's completely unconcerned with the real-world consequences of what he has done. Now, down in Israel, they've come up with a new way of trying to deal with some of their migrants. And Israel is offering to pay tens of thousands of African migrants to leave Israel within the next 90 days or face prison. Netanyahu declared their presence is a threat to the country's Jewish character. So it's a form of ethnic cleansing, which is kind of interesting because many of these African migrants are Ethiopians who are also Jewish. But apparently Israel is willing to pay African migrants to leave and saying they'll be thrown in jail if they're still there after the end of March. Gee, I wonder who he's going to get all that money from. It's going to be a lot of cash to do that. So basically, said the migrants' presence is a threat to Israel's social fabric and Jewish character. One government minister referred to them as a cancer. Now, some 60,000 have crossed into Israel from nations such as Eritrea and Sudan, many fleeing war and persecution, as well as economic hardship. So here we have Israel, which has been at the forefront of cheerleading the open borders of Europe and America. But when push comes to shove, they want their borders closed. They want their own society and culture preserved. Double standard. But do we see so much of that from Israel? Now, the Trump administration is looking at a proposal that may return more than 500,000 Indian tech workers back to India. And basically, he is saying it is time to pull back on these H-1B visas and start getting these jobs back to the American people. And we need to overhaul our education system so the American people know how to do those jobs, rather than running around with a degree in art history and wondering what the heck they can't find a job with that. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're just getting a report, apparently a little earlier today, part of Bill and Hillary Clinton's New York estate in Chappaqua caught on fire. And they had to get the firefighters out there, and they got the fire contained by 3 p.m. local time. It's not known how much of the property was destroyed. But, you know, seriously, if you're going to be burning incriminating evidence, you've got to be very, very careful how you do it. These things can get so out of control so quickly. All right, getting on back here to the immigration issue. Here's something Donald Trump is doing that I absolutely agree with. And basically, President Trump is banning welfare for immigrants, migrants. And basically, the new rules are going to be that migrants coming into the country will not be allowed to apply for any kind of welfare right away. In fact, they're talking about a 5-year window. That they will have to be in this country, working, contributing to society, contributing to the economy for at least 5 years before they would be allowed to collect welfare. And he's absolutely right to do this because we have a huge problem with the refugees and the illegal immigrants coming on in and immediately going on welfare. And it's bankrupting some of the states like California. And we simply can't afford to do that. And again, it gets back to what I've always said would be the key to solving this problem. Cut off the financial incentive for these people to come here. And they'll stop coming here. I'll bet you we're really going to see the numbers drop, both of the migrants and the illegal immigrants. When they find out that they can't just walk across the border and get free stuff. And I find that very angering that they're being taken such care of when all these Americans who were born in this country and have lived here all their lives are now living homeless on the streets, and there's nothing there for them. It's a very strange priority. Now, over in Germany, things are getting very, very tense. Apparently, the latest Civi poll for Die Welt is saying an overwhelming majority of respondents think Angela Merkel should resign immediately. And 46% calling for her to step down, while only 10% say she should stay. The rest apparently were undecided. And basically, a lot of these respondents are saying that if the coalition government talks fail yet again, Merkel should quit. Now, it's looking like Merkel will not survive her next election, even if she makes it to the end of her term. And unfortunately, the latest polls are showing Ursula von der Leyen as a strong candidate for the next chancellor. The problem is she's a Europhile. And that would be bad for the Brexit movement. It would be very, very bad for the independence movement that is growing in Germany itself. So unfortunately, it's not really an improvement. It's one New World Order chancellor leaves and another New World Order chancellor steps on. And let's talk a little bit about guns and gun rights, and specifically out in California with the start of the new year. You cannot buy ammunition from anybody except from a holder of a federal firearms license, a gun dealer. Unfortunately, due to some kind of administrative mess-up, the state has failed to issue any ammo vendor licenses. And so gun enthusiasts, sportsmen all over California are finding they can't buy ammunition. There's signs up on the window saying, we're sorry, we're not allowed to sell the ammunition. And first of all, it is an abridgment of the Second Amendment, and I would like to see somebody challenge it. But again, it's another way of trying to track people and track where the ammunition is going. They're calling it Ammogeddon out there in California. Now, there are an estimated 6 million gun owners in California, and they're obviously very unhappy. I think overall, the trend, we keep seeing more and more restrictions on law-abiding gun owners. And again, it's like the government decides that they're going to take cars away from all of us because of a few drunk drivers. Now, that really doesn't make any sense. And, of course, the gun grabbers will come back and say, well, cars have a use and a purpose. Guns have no purpose whatsoever. Yeah, they're fun. Put holes in paper. If necessary, you can hunt with them, or you can chase a criminal out of your home in an age where the average wait time for a 911 call runs 20 minutes. And I know because I'm one of those people. Many years ago when we were living in Southern California, I chased a thief out of our house with a legally owned firearm. I didn't even have to pull the trigger. That's what guns are useful for. All right, let's take another phone call here. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Wow. Control the ammo, you can control the guns, but I do think they dream of the day that they could take the cars away from us. I think in California right now they're fighting a tax per mile initiative, again, trying to, track everywhere you go. And
I think the area is California is broke, and they're just looking for any other revenue-raising system they can come up with that the people won't rebel against. But that tolerance factor is getting thinner and thinner. But I understand Agenda 30 wants personal transportation to be outlawed and all of us to be dependent on public transport. The problem is the public transport doesn't really go all the places most people need to go. If anything, it's going to increase the urban density around those train stations.
Food around Agenda 21 and the UN Man in the Biosphere, but there's lots of communities that have been collapsing in the last 25 years, that's for sure. And I think they're trying to get rid of any independent media and local media that they can.
Yeah. Well, we've definitely delayed their plans. I mean, they've renamed Agenda 21 to Agenda 30. So we pushed back the clock on that a little bit. Okay, well, according to our screener, you also wanted to talk about net neutrality in the Internet?
Well, that's what I originally, Ajit Pai, from some of the critics I've been reading about his statements, he doesn't even really understand how the Internet works. It's like he's trying to make it into just simply a channel selector.
Yes.
And you select from the approved channels that, are anybody else has to pay to get that can't afford to get their sites to load.
It has, and the corporate media has made no secret of the fact that they want the Internet turned into just another content delivery system. It's going to have a lot more buttons and a lot more whiz-bang to it, but yeah, they figure that anytime somebody is out there reading a web page they don't own, that's money lost. And so, yeah, the independent media is very much under attack right now. They want us to go away, first and foremost, because we're draining away potentially paying customers from them. And secondly, we're calling them on their lies and deceptions, like happened to that reporter with the video supposedly of Iran that actually came from Bahrain. The regulatory agency that ran the airlines, and then there was another one that was in charge of running the railroads. And when they were basically thrown out. Both areas improved. Competition increased, prices went down, service went up, and a lot of people are saying it's time for the FCC to do exactly the same things, just go away. Because anytime the government gets involved with managing these infrastructure technology, things get worse. Things really do get worse. Is because the internet has grown so big. I mean, and a lot of it's already fiber optic cable. They're literally running out of metal for wire, and it's making it more expensive because metal wires in the ground or even in the air, they age, they corrode, they have to be replaced. Fiber optic cables don't corrode, but they can break. And so the idea is to have this shared Wi-Fi network that serves more people with less resources. You're talking the Part 15. Don't really have that much range and reach. My show is carried on a lot of Part 15 stations out there. I don't know how many, but I keep hearing, it keeps getting back to me that that's going on. But again, the corporate media, they want media to be consolidated and all under their ownership. And again, when I was young, there were laws that said, no, media has to be kept broken up to keep it competitive, to provide a diversity of opinion. And over the last 15, 20 years, all of that's gone away. And now we have these mega corporations that basically are trying to control everything that you see, hear, and read. Again, a big reason for all these national monuments is to basically take our public lands and sequester them away with their mineral resources to pledge as collateral on government borrowing. So it shows just how bad things are in this country. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, over in Kansas, there was a horrible tragedy involving swatting. And if you don't know what the term means, it's a prank or a hoax where you call the police pretending to be witness to a horrific crime in a home, and the police respond basically thinking they're going into an armed situation. And there was this hoax emergency call, and the police showed up, and the man of the house opened the door and was fatally shot by the police. And now the family of the victim wants the police officer who killed him criminally charged for his death. Now, we know what we'll get from the police administration and the local government. It's in line with policy, blah, blah, blah. But right now, police in this country are killing more people than the terrorists are. And it has indeed gotten completely out of control. And somebody needs to remind the police, you check your target. You check your target before you pull that trigger. And we can't have a just system where the police can just make a mistake like that, shoot first and ask questions later, and nothing happens to them. Now, obviously, the person who placed the hoax phone call is culpable in all of this. And I find it rather interesting that in this age of phones that transmit your location and number, that they're not able to find these perpetrators. Maybe they used a payphone or something. But that is an issue. And unfortunately, it's something that does seem to happen a lot. You have to wonder, what's going on with our population, our society, our civilization, where this kind of behavior seems to be becoming commonplace. And it does seem like in that rush for ink and paper, we've lost all the good qualities that used to define what it was to be an American, which is kindness, generosity, altruism, courtesy, respect for others, respect for yourself. It all seems to be fading away. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm going to take a few minutes here to talk about this issue about banning coal or banning oil or banning gas. And in the good old days when technology would change, the technology would be developed and presented and shown to be advantageous, like the automobile over the horse. People would want to go through that change, and you would see the end of one epoch and the beginning of the next. Unfortunately, today we're in a situation where those who think they've got a good idea want to force it on people rather than make it attractive. And the biggest argument I have with the global warming cultists who go after oil and gas is they have not presented an evolved, developed technology that is an attractive replacement. Because they say, let's get rid of oil and gas and something will come along. Doesn't really work that way. And so it shows a certain lack of forethought. And basically they get caught up in the slogans, the jingles, the jargon. And they say, I'm against human-caused global warming and we've got to get rid of gasoline-powered cars. Okay, make something that's attractive to us. Electric cars are starting to get there now that they can get the charging times down, but where do you get the electricity? And all those people who are driving around in electric cars thinking that they're good for the environment don't realize the electricity in that battery was generated, most likely, in an oil-fired power plant or a nuclear reactor. There's only so much hydroelectric you can have in a country, and the U.S. has pretty much maxed it out. All right, let's talk about computers and technology and all that good kind of fun stuff. Apparently, the computer system operated by the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol failed late Monday night all across the United States on one of the busiest travel nights of the holiday season. We're talking people who at the end of New Year's Day were trying to get home and they couldn't get through border control. Obviously, domestic flights were not impacted. But it did result in horrendous lines at all the international borders. Why do they not have a backup system? You know, the main one goes down, move a couple of cables over, fire up the backup. When you look at how much damage can be caused, how much confusion, anger, missed flights can be caused by that system going down, it would almost make sense there'd be a backup. Look at everything NASA builds. There's always a backup system. America, welcome back to our show. And we're going to go right back to the telephones here. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
But I called about the Julian Assange. You've been talking about him earlier. And, you know, it seems to me that exoneration is one of the most dangerous things that could happen to him. You know, he walks outside that embassy, free or not, and he's very likely going to end up in a Seth Rich type position.
I'm sure that Julian Assange would take the appropriate precautions. All it takes is, driving a van without any windows into the embassy at some unscheduled time. He hops in, and they drive off to another undisclosed location where he heads off to where he was going to head off to. And I'll be very honest, I've never really decided if Assange is the real deal or if he was supposed to be a feed of propaganda onto the net. But it certainly does feel like he was being real with regard to the Democratic email. So maybe he, because of all the abuse he suffered, he's trying to do the job the right way. But in any event, I think he's been stuck in that embassy for long enough, and it's time to show a little mercy here.
Yeah. We'll have to see this. Well, hopefully, I'd like to see him complete whatever it is, he's doing in terms of these, releasing of these various forms of documentation. Basically, if he could get whatever he has out there and get attention onto it and keep it from being destroyed so that it can be utilized for, enforcement and setting things right, I'd like to see the man complete his mission.
Years ago, they were talking reunification, the way, Germany had reunified. And if there hadn't been all this outside interference, it probably would have happened by now.
Right. And there's even some off chance, I think, that if the top general he's surrounded constantly, felt that his bellicose blustering were going to potentially could actually trigger.
A lot.
All right, I've got to let you go, Mike.
All right, bye-bye. I have noticed, though, I've got the Fox News feed going on in here. They've been pounding on North Korea all day long about what a bad person Kim Jong-un is and Donald Trump's bigger nuclear button and mine works. And as I said, it comes across as just a little childish. It really does. And Trump does not actually have a nuclear button he can push because of what's called the two-man rule. And U.S. nuclear policy is that the president alone cannot launch an unprovoked nuclear strike against another country. He must have the agreement of one other member of national command authority. And that's a very small group of 10 people, and they all have their little cards with the numbers on them that they have to basically give over the phone when they're doing the order. And so Trump by himself can't do it. He'd have to have one other maniac to go along with that. I think that the U.S. might consider North Korea getting in there with a war, again, as another distraction, and to create a situation where China is no longer able to project as much power into the Western Pacific as it currently does. If you remember that brouhaha over the islands in the South China Sea. Obviously, the U.S. policy, they want to shove China back into China itself. And I got an update on that story about the swatting. It turns out they were able to locate the hoax caller. So to go on back here, basically on the 28th of December in Wichita, Kansas, a guy named Andrew Finch was basically shot at his door. And this was a hoax emergency phone call from a man who claimed to have shot dead his father and taken his family hostage and poured all kinds of gasoline all over his home, and he was going to burn it down. And apparently this was the result of an argument between two gamers playing Call of Duty online. And apparently the police are saying that the 28-year-old victim refused to keep his hands over his head and made a threatening move toward his belt, which is what they always say. But it turns out there was a 25-year-old from California, Tyler Barris, who made that phone call and started all of this ruckus. And boy, I hope they put him away for a very, very long time. That's a terrible thing to do to somebody. And I'm saying that because when I was a kid, we went through something similar. And this was back when SWAT teams were just starting to be the thing. And I had a friend who lived one block over from me, and his family was going through some serious difficulties involving domestic violence. And he fled the house, and he came to our house, and he said, "Can I call the police?" And he called the police, gave them his address, said that he was at our address, and somehow the police dispatcher swapped him. And we wound up having the SWAT team basically do a forcible entry into our home. And I want to tell you, that memory of my mother up against the wall with a shotgun at her throat has stayed vivid through all these years. So I know how traumatic that can be. Now, fortunately, no triggers were pulled. Police were a lot more restrained back then. But that is a horrible thing to do to somebody. Okay, getting on back into the computers, story out of the Daily Mail. Your phone really is spying on you. And apparently they've discovered there are literally hundreds of Android apps that covertly use your handset's microphone to listen into your TV habits to be sold to marketing companies for ad targeting and analysis. Now, it's a rather benign use of this technology. I'm sure most of us would rather have ads for things we're actually interested in, as opposed to ads for things we have no use for and it's just a waste of broadcast time. But it would also be very nice if there was an option out on this. but apparently more than 250 games on the Google Play Store, some of which are for children, were found to use software that documents the TV advertisements and shows that you watch. Part of me is a little bit surprised at that because I was always under the impression those cable boxes were reporting back every channel that you looked at. But I guess it's overkill. Apparently the information is collected even when the apps are not actually running, which means they're using up your CPUs and your batteries. Now, there is a popular Chrome extension that's got 105,000 users, and it's called Archive Poster. It's an extension that allows Tumblr users to reblog or report from other websites. Was found to be running CoinHive. And a lot of users reported significant spikes in their CPU usage. In other words, it's another clandestine cryptocurrency miner. It's malware. They're stealing your computer cycles to make themselves rich. There's a part of me that almost wants there to be a blowout of Bitcoin down to zero. Basically take away their ill-gotten gains. Now there's another big story, and this one's a doozy. Apparently, there is a fundamental design flaw in Intel's processor chips that is forcing a significant redesign of the Linux and Windows kernels to defang the chip-level security bug. Apparently, every chip made by Intel, every processor over the last 10 years may have this. And the bad news is the patch to fix this is going to have a significant performance hit on those Intel processors. In some cases, as much as 30% slowdown, almost 1/3 slower. Now that's a major goof. That is a major, major goof. And basically, this goof would allow malicious programs to read protected areas of a device's kernel memory. This is the memory dedicated to the most essential core components of the operating system and their interactions with the hardware. This is about as deep as you can get into the machine. And it could expose protected information like passwords. And this is hard-baked into the Intel x86-64 hardware. And it requires an operating system level overwrite to patch on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. And on some of those computers, some of the lower end ones, the cheaper ones, the performance hit will be as high as 30%. Now, following on this news, AMD's stock has soared. Intel is going to be in trouble, and in fact, Intel's CEO just sold a lot of his own personal stock, so he can see the writing on the wall. All right, let's grab another phone call here. Philip in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Yeah, since you're on Tech Talk, noticed something recently that's cropped up on my computer, my desktop here. You know how you get the little upside-down exclamation point that deals with cookies?
Yeah.
It allows you to see the list of the cookies that are on that particular website that you're on. Notice that it won't let me cull those. I click on it and it'll briefly flash on, and then by the time I click on it to see what the cookies are, it goes away.
Looks like somebody's trying to block you from seeing the cookies, but in any event, you can't delete a cookie that's on a website. You can only delete the cookies that are stored in your browser.
Okay, when it says, it gives you the option to remove and delete, says that if you don't refresh it, then after you choose the one that you don't want on there, it won't take to the system. So once it's in there, you just can't get rid of it, huh?
Well, that's not the way they're supposed to work. What browser are you using?
Using Chrome and Firefox and DuckDuckGo and, a range of them.
Well, just as one example, in Chrome, when you go into settings and you go down to advanced, and then at the bottom of the next block, there is clear browsing data where you can go on in and just clear out all the cookies. And unfortunately, it doesn't allow you to be selective, and you might want to take a look online to see if there is a way to selectively edit cookies stored in the browser. But that's basically the way to do it. Now, most cookies are benign, and they're helping you. And what I'm going to do, I need to put you on hold because we've got to do a break for commercial.
Okay.
Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking here with Philip in Virginia, and it took only about 15 seconds to do a search. How do I delete a specific cookie in Chrome? You go to the Chrome browser, you click Settings, you click Advanced, and under Privacy and Security, there's an item called Content Settings, and you can click Cookies there, and it will list all the cookies stored in the browser. Not on the website, but in the browser, and you can remove those individually, and I presume there is a similar system for the other browsers as well. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not looking to delete all of them because if I'm not mistaken, some of the sites you go to require them to function properly, right?
Yes, they do, and they contain saved information across sessions, and most cookies are good. But again, you might want to think about getting Malwarebytes, anti-malware, because when it scans your machine, it'll look for cookies that it knows are suspect and selectively remove those. And there is still a free version of Malwarebytes out there, I believe.
Malwarebytes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Aloha.
Aloha. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, a lot of people bought these smart in-home assistants over the holidays, like Amazon Echo. And the TV ads are always showing how helpful they are. How do you bake a pie? How do you clean a stain? How do you do this? But apparently, according to CNBC, Amazon is in discussions with huge companies that want to promote their products on Echo devices. So it's going to be less helpful and just another advertising conduit. So if you ask Alexa how to remove a stain, Alexa will recommend buying a specific product. And it doesn't look like there's going to be any way for Amazon to identify promoted responses versus honest results from the Alexa servers. I wouldn't have one of those things in my house anyway. Roomba, you've all seen it, the little robotic vacuum cleaner. Apparently, they're developing the technology to be able to build a map of your home's Wi-Fi coverage. They can already build a map of your home. But apparently, the new units are sensitive to Wi-Fi, and they can figure out where the Wi-Fi is in your home. Kind of makes you wonder if a map of your home is being sent somewhere as well. Now, Spotify, boy, are they in a lot of trouble. They are being sued for copyright violation for using people's music without compensation, without permission, and that even includes Claire. We got notified by the law firm about this lawsuit. And now, on top of it, they've had a major security problem. There's a cracker tool out there that is able to compromise Spotify accounts. Now, this tool was discovered by Collective Labs CEO Ryan Jackson. And we'll talk about it when we come back from station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about Spotify now, and apparently there's this hacking tool that was discovered by Collective Labs CEO Ryan Jackson. It's called Spotify Cracker V1, and apparently it is a brute force hacking tool that allows hackers to hijack large numbers of Spotify accounts. Now, Spotify's computers have not been broken into, but a lot of Spotify customers have been complaining that it looks like somebody else is using their account. And that is obviously going to be a bit of a problem here. Now, earlier in the show, we were talking about how Barclays had double-charged users of their credit card. Apparently, Capital One is having a problem with having double-billed customers. And the customers are very upset about that. And it does seem to happen from time to time. Before I was with my present cell phone carrier, I was with Sprint. And 3 times in the same year, we got billed for the same month twice. And I would call in to customer support. I'd hang on the phone forever and say, I've already paid this. I've got the canceled check. And they'd say, well, you're going to have to document it to us, or we're going to have to cut your service off. So finally I said, fine, cut my service off, and I went to another provider. This is not, brain surgery. This isn't software to control CERN or go to the moon or Mars. This is just simple bookkeeping. And why they're not able to make sure that it's working before they start using it, it boggles the mind. But then overall, quality of software has been in decline. And part of that, of course, is a certain corporatization of the process of writing software, where you just have these huge teams who are working on little tiny bits. I'm not sure that some of the newer languages and object-oriented programming are actually a benefit to writing clean, easy-to-debug code. And interestingly enough, I got an email newsletter from a tech company saying the 5 highest-paying, most demand computer programming languages, and things like Java and its variants. They keep changing the languages. And after a while, if you're running an older system, you may not be able to find somebody who can actually maintain it. I remember a few years ago, NASA was trying to recruit old Fortran programmers, which was the first computer language I ever learned. And so it can be an issue. I think at some point it would be nice if we sort of unified everything. And, of course, that was the whole idea behind the Unix operating system. One operating system for all machines, one programming language for that operating system. And it worked really well. It annoyed the computer vendors no end, because their business model was you buy our computer, you get our operating system, you get our programming language, and then you're stuck, because once you've developed your accounting package, you have to buy future computers from us because nobody else will run that software. And Unix completely reversed that. All righty, let's see. Here's a story just came on in. The new flu is off to a rocket start. The 2017-2018 flu season is being particularly nasty this year, and they're saying in part they believe because of a less effective vaccine. And the numbers are going way up. The last time I took Claire to the doctor, the waiting room was full and there was a line out the door, all of them sniffing and coughing. So this was a really, really nasty one. But I was told by a medical professional that whatever this particular strain of flu is, it was not included in this year's vaccine shot. Every flu vaccine is a guess, because they have to start the process of manufacture so early. They're guessing what will be the active flu strains for that year, and sometimes they miss it. And sometimes the flu shot can actually cause the flu. And we reported a couple of weeks ago where somebody realized that culturing the flu virus in chicken eggs caused the virus to mutate to a form infectious to chickens. So even if they've got the right strain, by the time they're done manufacturing the vaccine, it's for the wrong version of the flu. But they're still out there selling those shots. They're still out there selling those shots. Okay, now, let's see. Everybody's still complaining about that deal from Apple where they were caught literally slowing down older iPhones. Apple is saying it was being done to prolong the life of the battery, and apparently nobody is really believing it because of the underhanded way in which it was being done. And Apple's offer of a cheaper battery isn't making people happy. A lot of people are saying, you should give us a free battery, or change the warranty terms to support it for 5 years. How about longer lasting batteries? We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. That was actually a big issue for Apple all the way back when the first iPod was being sold, the little tiny teensy iPod, and the batteries didn't last very long. And when you went back to the Apple store, they would say, there's no way to replace it. You've got to buy a new iPod. And that, I think, led to some legal action as well. And Apple had to change its policy. Okay, now, apparently, over at the National Security Agency, their top talent appears to be in the middle of an exodus. And they're losing their top talent. They're being lured away by higher pay into the private sector. Apparently, morale at the NSA is very bad because of their public image ever since Edward Snowden. And apparently there was a reorganization of the National Security Agency that didn't make hardly anybody happy. So, the Arizona National Guard is being deployed to Cuba to support Guantanamo Bay. Now, we've all been hearing about this issue, should it be closed or not. I don't think it ever will be, because I think some of the prisoners who are being kept there have scars on their bodies indicating worse things were done to them than waterboarding. We know that because one prisoner who was released, Binyam Muhammad, went public with what was done to him. And so all these prisoners down there are an embarrassment. They represent potential war crimes charges against the responsible officials. And I think they're just going to be kept there for the rest of their lives. But apparently, the Arizona Army National Guard, unit of the Arizona Army National Guard, is starting right now in Cuba, deployed for approximately 9 months to help augment the staff. Now that raises a possibility. Are more people going to be sent to Guantanamo? Are they going to enlarge it for some reason? All right, I got an email in here, and this is for people who want to control the cookies on their computers. There's another free tool out there called CCleaner, and it's a very good one. It'll do registry repair, all kinds of useful functions. It also has the ability to selectively delete cookies from all of your browsers. So that's CCleaner. That's a tool everybody ought to have. Everybody ought to have CCleaner, and Malwarebytes. And Spybot Search and Destroy is another really good one. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be back with more news and hopefully more phone calls. 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Apparently over in Great Britain, they've been having a problem with, for lack of a better word, scalpers using automated software to snap up more tickets than allowed by event organizers so that they can resell them at a markup when the tickets run on out. And apparently Britain has declared this a criminal offense. It's a provision in the Digital Economy Act. Those who are acquiring tickets using automated means could face literally an unlimited fine. So it's rather draconian. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Chris in St. Petersburg, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, that CCleaner that you mentioned is a very good utility I've been using for over 8 years now for cleaning up the CRAP that Windows doesn't clean up on its own, doesn't know how to clean up after itself. But there's another one that's also free and does a few things that CCleaner doesn't. CCleaner does most of the things that Glare Utilities does, and Glare Utilities does a few things that CCleaner doesn't do. And Glary is spelled Glary. And I also want to let you know and the audience know that if they have a failing hard drive, a great utility for data recovery is Spinrite, Spinrite. But you need to have another hard drive installed or another storage device connected in order to save the data from that failing hard drive. So I just want to let you know about those two.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm looking at the Glary website right now, and I'll probably take a peek it looks like it's not for free. It's $5.90 for Windows, according to the page. But I will take a look at it because I'm always looking for utilities to keep my machine healthy and keep the bad people out.
Well, there is a free version, just like the CCleaner, and then there's a pro version, that they charge for.
Oh yeah, I see it. I see it. Gary Utilities free.
And you can get a free trial on either of those. The pro version.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the pointers.
You bet. Happy New Year and many more.
Happy New Year to you, too, as well. We're going to let China is doing some amazing things with their space program, and they're getting ready for a mission this year, which will be interesting. They're going to land a lunar probe on the far side of the moon. And it's an interesting technological demonstration. They're obviously going to have a relay craft to relay photos and scientific information. And you may say, well, what's the big difference between the front and the back side of the moon? Actually, there's quite a bit. And a big part of it has to do with the fact that most of our landers and most of the Apollo missions tended to hit those very smooth areas in the Maria, and except for Tsiolkovsky crater on the backside, there's none of that. So this lander will be landing on significantly different terrain, and so that one will be a fun one to do. Now, this one, just when you think all of this gender nonsense can't get any more bizarre, over in New York City, there is a 10-year-old boy who likes to dress as a girl who has started a drag club for children. His name is Desmond Napoles. He's from Brooklyn, and he's better known by his drag name, Desmond is Amazing, and apparently expressed an interest in dressing up in girls' clothes as a toddler, and he's a celebrity on the drag circuit. And I'm wondering, is this kid and his parents on medication of some kind? I mean, when I was 10 years old, I was into fast cars and shortwave radio. And maybe there's somebody out there who thinks that's bizarre for a 10-year-old to be doing. But that's a little out there. I think kids are being confused intentionally by all this gender nonsense. And last year it was just confusing. And I think a lot of kids are saying that they think they're the opposite gender inside, not because they really feel that way, but because it's become socially acceptable. In fact, you can get a minor celebrity. You get attention that way. And we may be causing some long-term psychological damage. Now, Rand Paul is out there saying, and I agree with him, we need to stop giving billions of dollars to countries who burn the American flag. And I'm in agreement with that. Why are we giving all this money away when we need it so much for this country, for our infrastructure, for our homeless veterans especially? There's a big stink going on where a lot of veterans who come back with post-traumatic stress disorder or actual brain damage, they're being given less than honorable discharges for no other reason than it cuts them off from VA support, save a few bucks. Rand Paul is absolutely correct. We're handing out all this money to countries who really don't like us. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better foreign policy. The one we're pursuing right now is going to end in disaster for much of the world. Apparently, Iranians are now getting suspicious that the protests are, in fact, an organized campaign of destabilization to bring down their government. And they're absolutely right. And we have to look back no further than 2009, when the U.S. tried to do it then. And they sent snipers in there to shoot people and blame it on the Iranian forces. And they came very, very close to bringing down the government of Ahmadinejad. And as I said earlier in the show, they only made two mistakes. The first mistake was when they unveiled the flag of the new Republic of Iran, it turned out to be the exact same flag that had flown when the Shah was in power. And that sent a very alarming message to the Iranian people. And of course, the second mistake was having the son of the Shah announce he was ready to reassume the throne. And it basically fell apart. And I hope it falls apart again this time, because at some point the United States needs to stop messing around with other people's countries. Because sooner or later, they're going to mess around with a country that's going to decide to strike back. I'm very alarmed looking at this list of countries on the neocon target list to see Russia there. Do they really think that we can take on Russia? We've gotten a small peek at Russia's military in Syria. They did very well. Speaking of military, we are now getting word that the F-35 may actually go into combat this year, which was amazing because last I heard, the software for the onboard cannon won't be ready until next year. But that would be very reckless to send the plane in before it's really fully ready. Apparently, the F-35 has developed the same asphyxia problem as the F-22, and they can't figure it out. So where did it all go wrong? As a nation, we seem to have lost the knowledge of how to manufacture quality products at an affordable price. Whether that product is a home appliance or a weapons system. I'm really very concerned. Like so many of the people we talked about in hour number one, I think 2018 is going to be the year the war really gets going. And I am convinced the United States is going to lose it. Primarily because our existing stockpile of weapons have been drawn down, worn out, by 17 years of war across the globe. Our new weapons coming online are very expensive, prone to failure. I look at the story of those Littoral-class combat ships, the Freedom class and Independence class. They may never actually see combat. They're already talking about just scrapping them and starting all over from scratch. Because apparently, along with the drivetrain and corrosion problems, the so-called modular configuration system, where the ships can be reconfigured for different missions, apparently does not work too well. I remember there was a video that we saw on one of the cable TV channels showing one of these ships out there undergoing sea trials. And the video was supposed to be a puff piece. Look what this ship can do. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's cutting-edge technology. And yet, the very last part of the video, the ship was alongside the dock. And they were running tests on weapon systems tied up to the dock because of the drivetrain issues. Did other countries lure away our best engineers? Is the software that's being used to engineer these things got its own bugs nobody's discovered yet? I think we've allowed all of our technology, weapons, computers, even appliances, to become too complicated, to become decadent, too difficult for the end user to fix. In many cases, they're sealed so you can't fix them. The model is break it, buy a new one. That's very damaging to the environment. You never hear that from the global warming people. I really think that we should be aiming at a simpler lifestyle. We don't need computers in everything. We don't need computers spying on our children, spying on our homes. I think we've let this get completely out of control. The more computer equipment you have around your home, the more vulnerable you are to hackers. And that is something that everybody needs to be aware of, because the government isn't going to protect you, and you're going to have to protect yourself. Close every single port of access. Okay, now.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from 2X Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.